The discovery, the distress beacon, wasn't meant for humans. That much was clear from the frequency pattern, the mathematical sequence that no Earth technology would ever use. Mining Station Epsilon 7 picked it up by accident, their deep space scanners, catching the edge of something that shouldn't exist in the dead zone between star systems. Marcus Rivera, the station's communication officer, almost dismissed it as cosmic background noise, but something about the pattern made him pause. There was a rhythm to it, almost like breathing, almost like a heartbeat. He recorded it, analyzed it, and when the results came back, his blood ran cold. Embedded in the alien signal were fragments of something impossible. Human DNA markers, encoded in a language that wasn't from Earth. Commander Sarah Chen received the report at 0300 hours, Earth Standard Time. She was a woman who had seen enough of space to know that most mysteries had boring explanations. Equipment, malfunction, solar interference, someone's idea of a practical joke. But when she saw the data, when she understood what Rivera had found, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 20 years of service. Pure, crystalline rage. The signal led them to a facility hidden in the shadow of a dead planet, 3 systems away from the nearest human colony. It was elegant in its design, all smooth curves and bioluminescent panels, clearly the work of the Zerathi Collective. The Zerathi had always been neutral in galactic affairs. Scientists and observers who claimed to study lesser species for the advancement of knowledge. Humanity had been in contact with them for less than a decade, and the relationship had been cordial. If distant, Lieutenant Tom Briggs was the first through the airlock when they breached the facility. What he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. Rows upon rows of chambers, each one containing a small figure suspended in blue gel. Human children, dozens of them, their eyes closed in artificial sleep. The youngest couldn't have been more than 3 years old, the oldest perhaps 10. All of them stolen from frontier colonies over the past 5 years. Their disappearances written off as tragic accidents or pirate raids. Chin's voice came through the cum, steady despite the tremor in her hands. How many? Briggs counted, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet. 47, Commander. They're all alive, but God, Sarah, they're using them for something. The facility's data core revealed the truth in cold, clinical terms. The Zerathi had been studying human neural development, fascinated by the unique way human children formed emotional bonds and creative thinking patterns. They had taken the children not out of malice, but out of scientific curiosity, the same way a human scientist might collect specimens from a rainforest. They had provided food, shelter, even educational programs. But they had kept them isolated, observed, catalogued like insects under glass. Dr. Relena Baskas, the station's chief medical officer, worked for 16 straight hours to safely extract the children from their chambers. Each one had to be brought out slowly, their systems carefully adjusted to normal atmosphere and gravity. As they woke, confused and frightened, calling for parents they barely remembered, something fundamental shifted in the humans present. This wasn't war. This wasn't politics. This was something deeper, older, carved into the very core of human DNA. Chen sent the message to Earth herself, bypassing normal channels, using emergency protocols that hadn't been activated since first contact. The response came back in less than an hour, signed by every member of the Global Defense Council. 2 words that carried the weight of an entire species' fury. Bring them home. But Earth didn't stop there. Within days, the story had spread across every human colony, every mining station, every ship in the void. The images of those children, pale and thin from years in artificial environments, their drawings of families they could barely remember, plastered on the walls of their sterile rooms, ignited something that transcended nationality, religion, or politics. The Zarathi ambassador to Earth, a tall creature with crystalline skin and too many eyes, appeared before the United Nations to explain. Its translator buzzed with carefully chosen words about scientific advancement, about the greater good of galactic knowledge, about how the children had never been harmed, never been in danger. The assembly sat in silence, and when it finished speaking, the Secretary General stood. "You took our children," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber and into every home on Earth. "You took them from their beds, from their parents' arms, and you put them in cages to study like laboratory animals. You monitored their tears, catalogued their nightmares, and called it research." The Zarathi ambassador tilted its head, a gesture that might have been confusion. They were provided with optimal care. Mortality rate was 0. Nutritional needs were exceeded. Education protocols were. "You don't understand," the Secretary General interrupted. "You never understood. You think this is about logic, about numbers, about acceptable losses. But humans don't work that way. We are not a rational species when it comes to our young. We are something far more dangerous." The first volunteer militia formed within hours of the broadcast. Veterans put on uniforms they'd sworn never to wear again. Mothers and fathers who had lost children in the raids signed up for combat training. Engineers retrofitted mining vessels with weapons. Scientists who had dedicated their lives to peace started designing new ways to wage war. Captain James Morrison, a retired Navy officer who had lost his daughter in what they'd called a colony disaster, stood before a crowd of volunteers in New Mumbai. His voice carried over thousands of eager faces. "They think we're primitive because we've only been in space for 50 years. They think we're weak because we value emotion over logic. They're about to learn that humanity didn't conquer Earth by being reasonable. We did it by being relentless." The Zarathi, monitoring human communications, began to understand their error. They sent apologies, offers of compensation, promises to return all the children immediately, but it was too late. The match had been struck, and the fire was spreading. Every human ship in space turned toward Zarathi territory. Mining lasers were recalibrated for combat. Cargo haulers were filled with soldiers instead of ore. The galaxy watched in disbelief as humanity mobilized. The Altari Merchant Guild reported that humans had stopped all trade to focus on military production. The Vegan Peace Assembly noted with alarm that Earth had recalled all diplomatic missions. The ancient Eldari observers, who had watched civilizations rise and fall for millennia, sent a single message to the Zarathi: "You have awakened something that should have been left sleeping." Chen stood on the bridge of the Epsilon 7, now bristling with weapons, watching the fleet gather. Ships from every corner of human space, some barely spaceworthy, all carrying the same message painted on their hulls for the children. She thought of those small faces, the way they had reached for her when they woke, calling her mama because they needed someone, anyone, to hold them. The Zarathi had made a calculation error. They had studied human biology, human technology, human culture, but they had failed to account for human rage, the kind that burned cold and patient, the kind that would cross the void itself to balance the scales. They had touched the one thing that could unite a fractured species into a single, terrible purpose. As the fleet began its journey towards Zarathi space, Chen received one last message from Earth: It was from a mother whose son was among the rescued children. Just 3 words: make them pay. Chen looked at the stars ahead, at the vast darkness between here and Zerathi Prime, and made a promise to herself and to every parent who had spent years wondering what happened to their children. The galaxy thought humans were newcomers, soft, and unprepared for the harsh realities of interstellar politics. They were about to receive an education in what happened when humanity found a common enemy. The war hadn't started yet, but every human in space knew it was coming. And when it did, the galaxy would learn why humans had survived everything Earth could throw at them, why they had thrived in conditions that killed other species, why they had spread across the stars faster than anyone predicted. It wasn't their technology or their adaptability or their intelligence. It was their ability to love their children more than they feared death. The reckoning. The Zerathi High Council convened in emergency session as reports flooded in from their border systems. Human ships, hundreds of them, moving in perfect coordination despite being a hodgepodge of military vessels, converted freighters, and mining ships. The Council's strategic algorithms couldn't make sense of it. No rational species would mobilize their entire spacefaring population for 47 individuals. Overseer Caxtheta, ancient even by Zerathi standards, addressed the assembly with what passed for urgency among their kind. The humans approach with 3,000 vessels. Our defense grid could eliminate them with minimal losses. Should we proceed with standard defensive protocols? The youngest member of the council, Zixara, had spent decades studying human behavior. Its crystalline form pulsed with distress. You still don't comprehend what we've done. We didn't just take their offspring. We broke something sacred too. They're not coming to negotiate or even to win. They're coming to make an example of us. The first contact came at Station Theta 9, a Zerathi research outpost. The humans didn't attack. Instead, a single ship approached under a white flag, broadcasting on all frequencies. The message was from a man who identified himself as Colonel David Park, father of one of the taken children. You have 6 hours to evacuate all personnel from this station. His voice was calm, almost gentle. This is not a negotiation. This is a courtesy we're extending because, unlike you, we can distinguish between military and civilian targets. 6 hours. The Zerathi station commander, believing this to be a bluff, sent back a response filled with legal citations, galactic treaties, and threats of intervention from the Galactic Council. 5 hours and 59 minutes later, the station still fully staffed, the humans kept their word. The attack lasted exactly 60 seconds. When it was over, Station Theta 9 was cosmic dust, and 300 Zerathi researchers were dead. The galaxy recoiled in shock. The humans, barely past their first century of space travel, had just destroyed a Zerathi installation. The Zerathi, who had been conducting their research for millennia, who had treaties with every major power, who were considered untouchable. But humanity wasn't finished. The next day, 3 more stations fell, then 5, then 10, each time. The same message, the same 6-hour warning, the same precision strikes. The humans weren't trying to conquer territory or steal technology. They were methodically dismantling every Zerathi research facility in existence. Ambassador Yixtel, desperate to end the destruction, requested a meeting with human leadership. It was granted, but not on Earth or any diplomatic station. The humans insisted on meeting aboard the cargo ship Remember Tomorrow, which had been converted into a medical vessel for the recovered children. When Yextel materialized in the meeting room, It found itself facing not diplomats or generals, but parents. 20 men and women whose children had been taken, sitting around a simple metal table. At the head sat Maria Santos, whose daughter had been gone for 4 years. "We are prepared to discuss terms," Yextel began, its translator working to convey proper remorse. "The High Council acknowledges that mistakes were made in our research protocols." "Mistakes?" Santos interrupted, her voice deadly quiet. "You stole my daughter when she was 5 years old. She called for me every night for the first year. Your records show that. You documented her crying, measured the stress hormones in her blood, noted the psychological impact of maternal separation. You watched her suffer and called it data." Yextel's form flickered, a sign of distress. "We did not understand. Your species is young. We assumed ... We calculated that the knowledge gained would benefit. Show it," Santos said to someone off-screen. A moment later, a holographic projection filled the room. It was a child's drawing, crude and colorful, showing a house, 2 tall figures, and a small one. "My daughter drew this in your facility. She drew it over and over, hundreds of times. Her home, her parents, herself. Do you know what the title was? The one she wrote on every single drawing." Yextel remained silent. "When I come home," Santos continued, "she never gave up hope that we would come for her. Even after 3 years, she believed. And you studied that hope. You measured it, quantified it, published papers on human psychological resilience in juvenile subjects." The other parents began speaking, one by one, each sharing their child's story. The boy who built a spaceship out of meal containers, convinced he could fly home. The girl who taught herself to read by scratching letters in the walls. The twins who held each other through medical examinations, refusing to be separated, even under sedation. By the end, Yextel understood. The Zerathi had made the greatest miscalculation in their species' history. They had seen human children as test subjects, failing to realize that to humanity, children were the future itself, the living embodiment of hope and possibility. "What are your terms?" Yextel asked, finally. Chen, who had been silent until now, stood. "Every Zerathi research facility will be destroyed. Your species will withdraw from any system within 50 light-years of human space. You will provide full medical and psychological support for the children for as long as they need it. And you will spread the word to every species in the galaxy. Human children are off-limits, forever. And if we refuse..." Every human in the room looked at the alien with the same expression. It wasn't anger or hate. It was something worse, certainty. "Then we will take your homeworld apart, piece by piece," Chen said. "Not because we want to, but because we need the galaxy to understand. We are a young species, yes. We are new to space, yes. But we are also the species that split the atom when we were still using propeller planes. We went from horse-drawn carriages to landing on our moon in less than a century. And we did all of that while fighting each other. Imagine what we can do when we're united." The footage of the meeting was leaked within hours, spreading across the galactic network faster than any censorship could contain it. The reaction was immediate and visceral. The Alteri condemned the humans as barbarians. The Vegan Peace Assembly called for immediate intervention. But notably, several species who had been victims of Zerathi research over the millennia sent private messages of support to Earth. The Zerathi High Council met for the last time in their current form. The evidence was undeniable. Humanity would not stop. They would throw every ship, every life, every resource into this conflict. It went against all logic, all rational calculation, but that was precisely the point. Humans didn't operate on logic when it came to their children. The surrender came 2 weeks after the first attack. Total, unconditional, and broadcast on every frequency in known space. The Zerathi agreed to all human terms and added voluntary reparations that would take centuries to pay. They dismantled their own research facilities before human forces could arrive, and withdrew so far from human space that contact would be unlikely for generations. But the real victory came in the message that followed from the Galactic Council. Signed by every spacefaring species, let it be known that any action against human juveniles will be considered an act of war against the entire human species, and responded to accordingly. Back on Earth, in a rehabilitation center in Geneva, 47 children were slowly learning to be children again. They played in real sunlight, felt real grass, hugged parents they had almost forgotten. It would take years of therapy, of patience, of love, but they would heal. Emily Santos, age 9, sat with her mother watching the news of the Zerathi surrender. She didn't fully understand what had happened, why the tall crystal beings who had kept her in the white rooms were gone. But she understood one thing, the thing her mother had whispered when she first held her again. "We came for you. We will always come for you." The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about humanity. They were not the strongest species, nor the most advanced, nor the most logical, but they possessed something that transcended all of that, the willingness to burn the stars themselves for their children. Commander Chen stood on the observation deck of the Epsilon 7, watching the fleet disperse back to their normal lives. Miners returning to their asteroids, traders to their routes, soldiers to their homes. The crisis was over, but the message had been sent, written in the debris of Zerathi stations, and the fear in alien councils. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage not with fanfare or diplomatic grace, but with a primal scream that echoed across the void. These are our children. Touch them at your peril. And for the first time in galactic history, every species understood that the most dangerous creature in the universe wasn't the one with the biggest teeth or the sharpest claws. It was the one that loved its young more than its own life.